things getting in, and without good information coming to you, you're going to not optimize what you're doing across that spectrum. And that's what they really want to do, is start from that day-to-day and actually reach all the way into the annual things around licensing.
James, Ian's very eloquently set out the kind of customer journey there, right through. Where do you fit in that?
So that's a great description. So when you have the customer journey, you start to optimize what we call best actions, or next best action, next best offer. So how do you optimize against that? Are you optimizing against a particular line of business profitability? Are you optimizing on creating the best customer experience? Are you optimizing on something else? So having these data and understanding, what's next best is an important factor. But then how are you pivoting that on which one of those? So from our perspective, a machine learning model is not just looking at what's the next best offer, but these compounding actions across different types of parameters. What am I optimizing against? And our view is it's about that customer experience. It's about understanding and lifting that particular metric to say, I'm going to drive the best customer experience for this individual. Should I be sending them this offer, ad, or certain content today, or should I wait a week? Because there's a temporal event to this as well. So being able to understand what's next best action, what's next best offer, and when should I deliver that to maximize the KPI I want, which is either customer experience or some business metric. So we fit in there to help people understand what is next best against a series of items.
And who would typically make those decisions in the organization? Who do you want to address to empower to make those decisions?
Well, as we're saying, so certainly you want to be able to give the information to the content creators to be able to understand what is pivoting, what do people want to do with that. But certainly to those advertising markets as well, to be able to understand, here are those segments I'm hitting. We build cohorts. So we go down to the individual. We look at a customer's journey and we say, this is the journey we like. This is how they behave. Now go in there and find me all the people who look like this individual, and then build a whole group of ideas and groups that you can start to target against and drive those performance. So it's a bottom-up segmentation value that we think drives much more value combined with these things. So it addresses the content creation, it addresses the advertisers and the marketers as well.
Lucas, who are you typically addressing in the organization?
Yeah, so we mostly work with the research departments. Since they have the direct needs, they're working with business within organizations. Although we work with a very, very wide spectrum depending on what is the actual need. We work with many different people within large organizations, but I'd say it's like 90-something%. I'd say it's mostly research people, VPs of research.
Ian, you mentioned direct to consumer. We see a lot of big media groups now positioning to try to move from a legacy culture that is very, very much about B2B and trying to transition to a place where the consumer is front and center, where they're really trying to organize themselves around the consumer. Do you think they're actually able to make that transition?
I think some will and some won't, is the most politic answer.
And what will determine that?
Yeah. I think that all will try, and one of our advisors said something very interesting the last few months, which was that casting forward in time, if you think about subscription services in particular, the winners will have evolved from having subscribers to having members. So membership being something that is beyond a transaction where you pay every month, but you're getting more. You're more involved. You feel some amount of ownership and connection. And you can do that through content, for sure. And there are media companies that do that every week with their content, and they're going to be fine no matter what direction they go. There are others that probably need to work more around building community and interaction around their content. But if you think about the things that matter when you're sitting there as a consumer and deciding what to do with two wallets, your attention wallet and the one that has money in it, right? The things that you're going to be reminded of are what make you feel good. What makes you feel good, at least for me, if you're on your couch, how good does it feel to spend 20 minutes searching for something before watching it? it doesn't feel good. You're starting to put that wallet away at some point. So no matter what your content looks like, you got to start focusing on developing what is a great experience, which I think you were getting at a moment ago, to make sure that as they flip through their options and think about those wallets, you're moving to the top of the list. And that does not mean only big players. We see small companies with very narrow offerings seeing great success because they've thought about that. They pay attention to those numbers. They look at binging both as a sign of success but also a future risk, and they act on that phenomenon accordingly. That's the kind of thing you have to do to succeed, is lean in to the numbers, lean into where a subscriber or any customer is on their journey, and touch them in a way that makes them happier.
So you would say that Netflix is spot on then in terms of describing its customers as members?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I think a really important thing is thinking about the happiness of your members. So we use machine learning too, and what we've really annealed that down to is what we call a happiness index, which is a score derived from all kinds of different measures that boils it down to, are you happy? And happiness we relate to reliability, or how likely are you to show up again? How likely are you to stay a customer? And you can act on that then based on why someone's unhappy. That's risk. Go do something about it.
Do you have any equivalent metric, James?
Absolutely. We call it served value. That's that commitment to the brand. So that's the important part. I agree with you 100%. And what you want to do is align that with other metrics and data you can. So the freshness of the data is going to be important. The winners in this race are the ones who not only are doing this once, but can have a pipeline, a structure to be able to get fresh data on a regular basis. And then imagine you can combine other experiences in, whether it's your shopping behavior through your Amazon profile, because it's somehow connected, through your display manufacturer, if it's a Samsung, and they have video display data that you can combine. So when you can combine multiple data sources to rank that metric and provide that information, and then have a process to make good business decisions, then I think those are the folks who are going to really win this race. And it's gonna evolve over time. It's going to get better and better and better.
So Lucas, we heard there that fresh data is key. How fresh is your data?
Our data is very fresh. It's daily. It's refreshed daily. Yeah. Although it goes back to the first days or the first customers, first sign-ups of the services that you mentioned, for instance, Netflix. I mean, Ian, you mentioned for a moment 20 minutes searching for content. I believe that's a number for OTT, right? For linear, it's actually even longer. Audiences are looking for content for over half an hour a day. And together, actually, that's almost an hour a day of searching for content and not finding almost anything to be watched. So it's really hard. I mean, it's a content mess. There is a lot of content. Recommendation algorithms are promoting certain contents, for instance, content being produced by the distribution platform rather than something that you're actually really interested in. So in order to understand exactly that, and the metric, for instance, if you're a content owner and the data that you're getting back, it's also important to benchmark it against the whole industry to see how others are doing. And you don't really have an option to do it. Well, you didn't until now.
Believer in recommendation, Ian?
Yes, but.
Come on, so expand on the but.
Well, I think, of course, having some guidance about what to do next is useful. But if you look at the numbers, I think that the success rate has never reached the place where everyone wants it to. And so I compare recommendations to really good curation. And I think really good curation still wins. So people who intimately know the content, they're paying attention to how it connects. I think leveraging machine learning behind that is absolutely sensible. And then paying attention, if you started using for recommendations not only what we do today, which is collaborative filtering, so people who like this like that, and sort of relatedness around content, but actually started paying attention to how entertaining content is, you might start cracking it. So as we've started looking at that, we're not a recommendation engine at all, but we feed into them. by providing content that we have what is called a good attention index. So it's almost like a net promoter score. How likely are you to recommend this to a friend? And we can do that algorithmically to start looking at content and find, for example, content that has low viewership but a really high attention index, which means of the people who started and watched at least a minute and less than 25%, you subtract those from those who watched at least 75%. And if you get a really high score, it means people are finishing. Very few people are bailing, and that's a bad sign, and most are completing. That's a great thing to promote. That's a great thing to drop into a recommendation engine. And so I think the model will get better and better, and I think machine learning will drive it, but that plus curation, to me, is probably for the near future the best thing for consumers.
But Lucas, you were kind of implying that the systems are kind of skewed right now towards a different agenda.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've built our own recommendation engine because it's just the most natural way of working, for instance, with TV OEMs in order to get opt-ins, in order to get the data back on how and what people are watching. It's just the most natural way. And we feel that the product that we've created is pretty robust. For instance, for some vendors, it's actually it goes outside the actual device, the TV screen. We add on certain profiles in order to understand who exactly is watching, not to get those mixed, which you don't really get, for instance, on STBs, right? If you have an IPTV, it's a recommendation for a household. But even if you watch TV together and you are an IPTV service provider, if you get return path data, how do you find out who was exactly sitting in front of a screen? So that, there are different bits and pieces which are obvious once you go down at the granular level, but they're not really done right currently.
I mean, there's a real challenge, isn't there, Ian, which is, the sheer quantity of new stuff that is coming through, into these pipelines. The challenge is exposing that new programming to the audience all the time. I mean, Netflix is averaging something ridiculous like, 2 titles a day. How can they possibly keep exposing that sufficiently to justify, the investment they're making in that content?
Yeah, I think there's 2 stories there. One is it touches on the cohort idea that was talked about a little bit earlier. They're starting to build up personas, and you're starting to see an experience that is shaped by whatever they've dropped you into in terms of a persona. So it's not a boil the ocean approach, I don't think at all. I mean, they have an ocean, but they're putting you in a lagoon and curating algorithmically in most cases what's been pushed in front of you. But make no mistake, I mean, Netflix is doing 2 interesting things together competitively. They are convincing everyone to binge. They're convincing everyone to burn through content, and then they are investing in tons of content because it puts pressure on smaller players who don't have as much content. If the involvement with the service is to get in and watch as much as you can as quick as you can, that works to the benefit of someone who has a massive library. It works to the detriment of someone with something small. So, I'd say they're going to keep that pressure on to make it hard for smaller niche players to enter.
James, you've built some pretty sophisticated analytics tools here. What determines success or failure in actually deploying these kind of solutions in a media business?
Well, in the media business, you start with those KPIs, those business outcomes. So you work with those executives to understand which needle are you trying to move. Are you trying to move the consumption needle? Are you trying to move the advertising needle? You have to look at all those elements, and then you work backwards from there. So understanding that, understanding the data sets, those cores, those journeys, and then you make the appropriate recommendations. So the winners in the recommendation engine, the next best offer or the best offer action you can have is dependent on how do these things play against each other. How do I balance multiple business goals at the same time, and then how do I do it over time? $1 invested today in this program may not be worth as much $1 invested tomorrow in a different program. So looking temporally over time of how these things get balanced off is important. And this is something that traditional BI just couldn't do. And that's why you have these new machine learning AI techniques coming out, is we look at that temporal component to say, what is the best strategy over the next 3, 6, 9 months of executing, and how should I invest those dollars to get the most impact to whatever it is I want to do. Increase satisfaction, increase revenue, increase ads.
So Ian, you've had, prior to setting up Wicked Labs, you developed one of the first OTT video platforms out there, the platform, and now through Wicked, you've had a lot of experience of deploying these solutions. What have you learned in terms of best practice?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think for the world we live in now, committing to collecting all the data first, understanding the question you're trying to answer at the endpoint, and all the questions you're trying to answer. So that notion of KPIs, if you visualize those first, you can then work your way back to understand what you need to be collecting and how you need to be organizing it. And right now, I think that's still very nascent, where it's more the other way around. People look at the data they have and then see what it tells them. And in the truth of it all, you need to think about what you need to know and then go get that data. And so we're really seeing the market transform in that direction now that some KPIs are starting to emerge, and the companies like these are starting to set some stakes in the ground about what's possible, what you could know if you had this data. And they usually have it, it's just not organized properly, or they haven't implemented it right in terms of analytics. But that's all blocking and tackling. I think in general, the data is all there, and it's just a matter of putting it in proper context.
Just to build on that point for a second, people talk about big data. It's not about big data, it's about big enough data. If small data will do to hit my KPI, that's what you want to do. I've seen a lot of companies stumble on trying to implement big data and not get the program finished. You start, you move the needle, it has an improvement, and as you go through this process, the data itself tells you what's the most important, and then you go get more of that data. So don't try to get all the data at once. Don't try to build everything at once. Get something running, look at it, it's going to point you in the direction, and then you invest your time, energy, and resources in that direction, and you'll be way more successful and get low-hanging fruit faster.
So you need to be clear about the questions that you're trying to answer.
Well, but you also need to be open-minded about things you haven't asked about, because I think that's really important. Of course, you need to have KPIs in mind, but the data sometimes delivers fruit that you didn't expect, and you shouldn't ignore that at all. I mean, I think you want to run with that when you see it.
That's the benefit of machine learning. The whole point of AI is to tell you something you didn't even think of asking. So that's the key.
So give some examples. What has emerged in your experience, either or any of the three of you, that you weren't expecting?
For example, I'll give it an experience from an advertising example. So in the automotive space, we were sending out all these, the OEM was sending out all this marketing advertising to these clients. And until they did the numbers and did the research, they saw that 63% of the people that they sent this emails out to had a net neutral or a negative impact. Meaning it actually deflected them from the brand. They were upset they were getting these emails because they were getting these reminder emails of things that they shouldn't be getting after they just purchased a car. Hey, you just bought a brand new car. Oh, here's a promo on a new car. Well, that kind of took me away from the experience I wanted. So understanding those courts, number one actions, remove all those people from that marketing communication. Focus on the people you need to. So there's things in there that they saw that they wouldn't have otherwise known, and they were able to act on it in a very fast fashion.
Ian, surprises?
After 6 months, if someone isn't using your service, you should just not communicate with them if you want to maximize lifetime value. At that point, you're reminding them of something they've probably forgotten about. And it's intuitive once you think about it.
So just keep collecting the money and hope for the best.
Yeah, the more interesting one is looking at binging. So when you start seeing binging behavior early, like starting in a trial and continuing in the first billing period, huge danger sign. And the action is to promote other content, because if someone's just getting through what they know and they don't connect in with things that they don't know, it's obvious when you look at it, but the numbers really bear true. That as much as we talk about it culturally as this thing that everyone should do, it can be really dangerous if it's early on in tenure and not based on new content entering that everyone's excited about. They come in for a purpose, they're getting in, they're getting out, and probably moving their wallet somewhere else.
Thanks. Lucas, what surprised you in the data you've unearthed?
What surprises? There are actually many surprises. The fact that, for instance, Netflix wouldn't be Netflix without third-party content, and now that content is leaving Netflix, and the vendor that we all know about is now building their own platform. Because, for instance, we have information on what drives users to a certain platform. So what is the actual title that they're launching at first after arriving to a platform? How long they've seen it for, how many episodes, how many seasons they've seen, and then again, how long they've looked for finding something else. There is also a huge problem, I'd say, with windowing. With geo-blocking. We see
a problem in what way?
Okay, so for instance, the way we view our panelists, we see them across different devices and across different services. So for instance, we see people in different countries, for instance in Poland, where I'm from. Netflix recently just launched season 5 of Suits. While in the US, I believe it's season 7, in the middle, or maybe already launching the second half of season 7. We see how many people go and torrent and stream illegally season 6 and season 7. And it's just because it's not available. And we also see the churn rate it brings, because we see I'd say a fairly large amount of people that do not find the additional seasons. They download it from torrents and then they leave the service. While the content is there, it's available in certain countries, people get mad on certain platforms. But I'd also like to reflect to that big data part, because we have it in the claim. So for us, it's very, very important to gather as much data as possible. Not only to make smart decisions, but also to go and find out really, really granular business intelligence. Because it's not only about finding the actual ratings, top level, if you're number 1 or number 2. That's absolutely no information today within the industry. It's more about how you're doing, how each episode is doing, how each season is doing, and far, far deeper.
So we've had a lot of agreement, I think, on the panel. I would have preferred a bit of disagreement, I think, to make things lively, but I think we've had a really interesting discussion. So thanks to all three of you very much, and thank you to all of you for listening. Thank you.
Gentlemen. Nice job, guys. We're headed up that way.
All right, thanks, guys. Cheers.
Well done. Yeah. Good job moderating. You can do the next one.
Test.
Hello.
Test 1, 2, 3. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Network Optimization for Storage and Delivery session. We're going to start in about 20 seconds, so hopefully we'll get a few more folks here, and we'll begin.
So, guys, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm over-caffeinated.
Good. I like that. Over-caffeine is good.
I don't know what. I don't have anything planned. It's going to come out.
Oh, we're going to wing it. That's it.
And who knows what's going to happen.
That's good, too. Okay, we're going to start here. Thank you very much for joining us. So before I ask each of the panelists to do their own introductions, I want to tell you something. Everyone in this hall has a problem. And one of the problems is you sleep and your data doesn't. It never stops. There's an insatiable appetite, as everybody in this hall knows that data is going to continue to grow and grow. Some of these numbers, these factoids, are really incredible. Just to level off a little bit here. YouTube users watch over 4 million videos a minute. Americans use over 3 million gigabytes. Americans, 3 million gigabytes of data every minute. Even the Weather Channel receives over 18 million forecast requests every minute. So your problem is there's so much data, and these guys are going to introduce themselves to tell you how they can help your problem. Scott, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Hi, my name's Scott Shadley. I work for a small startup called NGD Systems, formerly known as Next Generation Data, but that was a mouthful, so we went for an acronym. I'm the VP of Marketing and Storage Technologist there. We build physical hardware, so out of a lot of the things that you see around, everybody's headed towards this software-enabled everything, software as a service. You got to store your data somewhere, and as you mentioned, your data size is getting so large that you've got to be able to manipulate it appropriately. You can ingest mass amounts of data, but you have a hard time getting it back out. So we built a product called a computational storage drive. It's basically a microserver in each SSD that we produce.
Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Santamaria, with CEO of Folio Photonics. And on the other end of the storage spectrum, we're on the archival data storage. Like, what do you do to store your data for 100 years? So you think, when I look around this show, everybody here does one thing, and it's either generate data or manipulate data. And, you know, everyone talks about the cloud. What is the cloud? It's a square mile of spinning hard disks that you pay a lot of money for. That's what we do. We want to take the cost out of that and give you a better way for storing data for a long, long time.
So getting back to just this insatiable appetite here, some predict maybe in the next 2 to 3 years that there's going to be 175 zettabytes of digital data in the ecosystem in the next 2 to 3 years. Each zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes. It's well over my math brain, but nonetheless, there are technologies that are developing in storage that's going to help store, manage these unbelievable assets. And maybe just, Scott, talk a little bit about some of the different technologies that are out there, the technology that you're choosing to give everybody a little bit of perspective of where this technology is actually going.
Absolutely. So if you think about the data capture aspect of everything, as you mentioned, 175 zettabytes has got to go somewhere. But the harder part is what to do with it once you've got it there. So if we talk about throwing data into a storage locker, whether it be an archival, being your hot data, your warm data, your cold data, your whatever tier you want to put it in, accessing and managing that data is still a problem, and it's both a storage itself and also a networking problem, whether it's network within a server, network between servers, or networks across country. You're trying to transport massive amounts of data. Generally speaking, I'm going to transfer 10 terabytes across a wire. I only need about 100 gigabytes of that data, but I'm not able to pre-process it properly. And that's what we do, is we take that data that's stored locally and we only give you what you really want. By running the application you're normally running in a host level, we push it down into every one of the drives and they run in parallel in a distributed fashion. So if I've got 175 zettabytes and I really only care about one cat picture, I can find that cat picture faster.
So the power, you know, I'm a kind of an old-fashioned traditional television operations guy. And the key about that ecosystem is you've got to acquire your content, you've got to process your content, you've got to deliver your content, and you've got to archive that content.
Exactly. And so by being able to help with the processing and delivery, we help free up the network system to do a lot of other things and allow the host platform to do it in other places or in other ways.
So, Stephen, what are some of the technology advantages that you guys are looking at from a Folio perspective?
So Folio makes an optical disc. So I have one right here. It looks like a Blu-ray disc. Standard Blu-ray disc have a capacity of 150 gigabytes. This has 1.6 terabytes on it, and it's multi-layer. And the advantage you have on something like this is an optical disc lasts a long time. So what people struggle with is if I store data in the cloud and I want to save it for 100 years, and you were using a magnetic media like a hard disk, which has a 4-year life, every 4 years you have to migrate that data to new hardware. And this has been going on for years and years. With an optical disk, you write it once, you save it, and it's there for 100 plus years. So you skip all those different migrations. It becomes a much more efficient way to run your data center, and it becomes a much more efficient way, more cost-effective way to build your solution.
So it's 2019, and an observation that I think I have, and maybe you can correct if it's wrong, is that the dominant source of storage continues to be tape.
It's hard disk and tape.
Yeah, our favorite friends, yes.
But they're magnetic.
So the question is, how do you drive a value proposition to some of those legacy companies that are still using Iron Mountain as their sophisticated storage engine? What is the value proposition to them to actually make this digitization process?
It's cost. If tape costs 3 cents a gigabyte, our product costs 0.6 of a penny and lasts for a lot longer. And so when you look at your archival, the best example an operator once told me was that my archival data process, it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. I start at one end. By the time I get to the other end, I got to go back and start over again. It takes 4 years. And he goes, I got to break that cycle, because what's happening now is it was okay when you have just terabytes worth of data, but now we're talking about petabytes, exabytes, we reference zettabytes. These are numbers that people even haven't conceived of. And we're just doing more and more and more of it as the world moves to a data-centric world. And so the opportunity is, how do I get control of that? Or else all I'm doing is copying and recopying and copying data over and over and over again. Or worse, you don't, and it fails. And then you lose your data. That's a big fear.
So how do you differentiate yourself from, if you will, your competitors? What value add stuff do you bring to the table that makes I'm going to say this, and you'll probably say, I don't know what I'm talking about, your dumb storage device smart?
Okay, he has a smart storage device. Okay, that's where his product is.
Is that the point?
Well, yeah,
can you coexist separately?
Yes.
Or do you need to actually exist?
We're very complementary services, if you will. So you tend to think about the product I work with is on the front end of everything. I'm on the acquisition side and the instant processing, me. I'm uploading all these different videos and I want to create all the thumbnails of it so I can reshare it and get my 1 million views. That's the kind of work that I'll do. And once that video has hit its 1 million views and people stop watching it, it migrates down the stack and eventually needs to be stored away. And the trouble that we run into with things like tape and magnetic discs today is they're cheap and it's what people are used to, but it's very slow to recover from. And that's one of the advantages that he brings in his definition of
Talk a little bit about... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to add to that. The analogy that I like to use to help put people in mind, it's like your wedding photos. So you get married and you hire a photographer, takes all these photos. And as soon as you get them, for the first 30 days, you're looking at them every day. Going, oh my God, so-and-so's here, look at us, how pretty we are. That side of it, where you want instant access and look at it, that's Scott's business, to make this thing available so that people can see it. But over time, you start looking at your photos as much. You look at them, on holidays and anniversaries until the very end, 50 years from now, that you look at it, they want to pull a photo out because someone's passed away, and they want to put your wedding photo up.
Yeah.
That storing for that 50 years, that's where the archival business at Folio's did. The quickly going through and sorting through the photos and having them instantaneously available, that's Scott. Yeah. So you build a solution that's a hybrid. So early on, they have access to his resources. Later on in the process, they start utilizing my resources.
The media guys calls what you do asset management.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about where some of the so-called verticals are in their needs for storage, and maybe the media guys, sounds crazy, might actually be ahead of the curve right now.
Well, and so that's very interesting. And if you think about all the media acquisition that we're talking about, and we've made comments about wedding photos, video capture, cat pictures, whatever, that's really not the meat of what people really care about in the market today. That data is almost the dumb data. The important data is the metadata. What you and I do, what our shopping habits are, what our visual habits are, managing that for these media companies is really what becomes more important, because I can store 7,500 movies on a drive and I can deliver 7,500 movies, but it's the 2 million people watching those that I really care about, and their statistics and their habits, and that metadata management, that's the kind of stuff from a perspective of media and delivery that we're working with. One of our streaming media customers doesn't use us to store the movies because it's too expensive. It uses more low-cost, dumb storage, but when it comes to the user authentication, statistics, where they're watching it, is it a mobile, is it a TV, is it at an event like this, That's where I add even more value for those types of customers.
Some of the other verticals, whether it's medical, government, they all have the same problems. Their cultures may be drastically different to figure out ways to solve that. How do you place Switzerland to that different community?
In our case, and I'll pull out my show toy now. So he showed his toy, I have to show mine. So this is 8 terabytes of storage in the palm of my hand, which can fit in any kind of device that you can think of to plug it into. And it allows you to instantly manage data. So think about doing genome sequencing or doing DNA testing at a police station. Those types of medical use cases. We've got another customer in the aerospace where we're doing data analytics on the airplane. They unplug the drive from the plane, they plug it into a server. It takes 4 hours to find out what just happened in a 1 hour flight. The plane's already taken back off and flying around again. I can give you the no-go just by plugging my drive in and doing the analysis on the data in place.
How about your perspective on some of these different opportunities from a vertical perspective?
Yeah, from a vertical, so obviously the big cloud service providers, the Amazons, the Azures, et cetera, that are providing the service to people, those are very high valuable targets for us. The media industry or healthcare, as you mentioned. So most hospitals now retain patient data for life of patient plus 30 years. So here's the trick. When you come in and you go to the emergency room, hospitals typically heal you in 30 days. So for 30 days, they keep that data accessible on a SCOT system so they have nanosecond access to it as they're healing you up, making you better. But once you walk out the door, they want to get it onto something that's less expensive as quickly as they can, and that they can still have access to. And that's where they want to archive it so that when you show up 20 years later, you've been in another car accident, they can pull your old records, your old x-rays, your old files and bring them up and do comparison side by side. They do not want to have that in a data center that has a 5-hour SLA. I mean, could you imagine going to the hospital and saying, hey, I can't compare your old data because I have to download it from the data center. It's going to take 5 hours. They want less than a minute access to that, and that's what we can provide at a very cost-effective way.
Do your customers require you guys to be the network services provider, or do they want to control aspects of the network to define their QoS?
Yeah, so for us, we'd rather have them control it. Our concept is along the lines of the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. We don't want to make a customer have to re-architect the system to utilize our tool. So we're a drive. We plug in, you store to it, you do whatever you want to it. We can add value to that, and we don't modify the code or the system management that the users are doing. So I don't want that control. I want to let them continue to have that. What I want to do is free up those resources for them to make it more usable.
The but maybe is if the network doesn't meet the requirements that you think your customer actually needs, your network or the network can compromise what you do.
It can from a total throughput perspective, but any bottleneck in the network that creates a data transfer gap, I simplify that data transfer gap because I'm moving simply less data. So as a total travel package, it'll still be more efficient even over an ugly network by having less data flowing across that network.
So public networks is something that doesn't scare you. It doesn't scare you from a security perspective, from a contention, blockage, latency perspective?
Again, as far as it comes to accessing the data, we can manage through all of that just like any other storage device does. There's not a lot of storage device itself can mitigate from that perspective. I can run encryption. I have the end-to-end data encryption on the drive. I can run a user encryption model on the drive. So all of that just plays into move less data, expose fewer keys. So one of the big things we have now is everybody's losing their keys. And if you lose a key, thousands of users are exposed, and they can snoop a data bus today on a network, if it's network attached, or even within a server. They can snoop and find those keys as they're being transferred from the CPU down into the drive. Since I'm running it inside the drive, the key never leaves the drive. So I'm actually a more secure solution from that perspective.
Feel the same way?
Yeah, the lowest common denominator will be a function of whether it's the network, the drive, or the media, clearly. And what we're trying to do is you're trying to optimize it because you get what you pay for. I mean, you can put everything in flash, all your storage, but it's going to be very expensive. And so you as a user has to balance between what are my principles of storage. I'm going to keep near-term data very close, very hot, very fast, and as it ages and moves down, it becomes less fast, but you still want to have access to it.
10 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago, the suppliers here were hardware providers. The transformation in those 15 years are their full service solution providers. Many of those guys still have a hard time, frankly, getting out of the mindset that they're not selling boxes. You guys are really hardware. How do you start to educate your potential customers that you're more than just hardware?
That's a very good point. So hardware was really cool in its time, probably now over a decade ago. I put the first enterprise SSD into a server myself.
The old guys like me remember that.
So I remember that. I launched the very first enterprise SSD with Dell EMC in 2008. So yeah, it's been just about 10 years. So hardware is not sexy anymore. Software is sexy right now, so that is definitely an interesting piece. And when you come to what I do from a hardware perspective, everybody that creates a software platform has to run on storage. So you need storage, and if you can have smart storage for no more dollars per gig than any other SSD in the same class, why wouldn't you get a brain intelligent device compared to an off-the-shelf, quote-unquote, dumb drive?
Yeah, I mean, these cycles always happen. Hardware takes this big leap, and then the software guys figure out how to take great advantage of it.
Exactly.
And that's what you're seeing. So you say, yeah, we're not that sexy right now, but people are starting to feel the pain and see the problem with their storage. So I'll give you an example. I saw a study Intel did, and one autonomous vehicle generates 1 terabyte of data per day. One car. And so you start magnifying this. That zettabyte problem becomes, it's yottabyte is the next one, right? A gazillion gigabytes of data that's sitting in the cloud that needs to be stored somewhere. And people are starting to realize that data in itself is an asset.
Yes.
And you just don't want to generate data and let it sit. It's like cash. You want to invest it and do something with it. You want to get a return on your data. And so you see all these companies reinventing themselves. All these big manufacturing companies said, 20 years ago, I made this. Now what I'm doing is I've embedded IoT sensors, and I'm sitting there generating data that I can track in terms of very positively try to manage different support cycles. You talked about metadata. That's new. I mean, in the days of this show started, it was film, which is a static medium. Now you look at half these people out here are talking about metadata tied to the content that now they're doing all kinds of interesting things in, from ad placements to taking metrics, etc. So it's just generating this data, and people are figuring it out. And every time they do, the software will get ahead where they're going to need more and more better hardware, and this is kind of where we step in. So it's a push-pull, goes back and forth.
Absolutely.
30% of the engineers at shows like this spend their time on standards bodies. Maybe that's successful, maybe it's not, but it's a necessary requirement in the media services business. Because I'm kind of a novice in your world, are standards an important component for your storage platforms?
Absolutely.
And if so, who are some of those organizations?
Yeah, so if you think about it, today the hot thing in storage that there is, it's called NVMe, Non-Volatile Memory Express. It's a PCIe attached SSD, which is what we make. That is a standard that was started by the Non-Volatile Memory Express group, which is a consortium of 30 or so companies. I build a computational storage drive. In order to make it acceptable in the market, I also kicked off a standards body around it. So I have 39 companies helping go, wow, that's really cool. I think I need to do something with that. And so, yeah, standards are absolutely a mandatory thing, especially in storage platforms. Whether you go from on-prem, private cloud, public cloud, they all have to be able to talk to one another. So there's network standards. The storage inside those has to have some commonality so that you can do upgrades, transfers, all that kind of stuff. So that it is a vital part of our role.
You feel the same way, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not lose sight of the fact that the great big data centers, the Azures, the AWSs of the world, the Googles, the Facebooks, etc. They drive a lot of the standards as they push the envelope on what next generation data centers look like. So the Open Compute Forum is a big one here that we all participate with. Is basically what they're doing is they're dictating, well, this is what the storage environment is going to look like in 10 years, and you got to make sure your product fits because you don't want to be an orphan on the outside looking in.
Again, bringing a little bit of a media perspective, there's no question that media operations execs and managers are control freaks. The concept of their core intellectual property, their asset, their digital content asset, is going to be off-prem in some cloud, even today, still becomes a difficult mindset. What are you starting to see the shift of that mindset, and what's driving, if you will, the cloud to be more accepted by some of those companies that used to say, my asset, I'm in total control?
A lot of that comes down to what the cloud providers are actually doing. I mean, a cloud is just a data center, and it's how I'm managing that data center, how I'm giving users access to that data center. It used to be a lot more where the data center providers and the cloud guys were saying, you have to use it this way. And now they're saying, here's bare metal. Just go do what you want to do it. OCP is a good example. Open19 is another one. It's a good example of stuff like that. Helping people drive that direction to get away from having to not be able to use a cloud architecture.
Same way?
Yeah, I mean, it's always evolving, and you're seeing these hybrid systems come up here where people look at, there are some things, these are my crown jewels, I don't trust the cloud, I don't trust where it's going to be, I'm going to keep that locked down on my own storage platforms. Other data, I'm more willing to. It all comes down to it's cost versus performance for the user, and as it's like in anything else, you have to manage that to the best of your company.
Yeah. Where again, my heritage has always been part of the reason why the media guys want to be in control is because they've got this unbelievable infrastructure that they've already invested hundreds of millions of dollars in, and although it might not necessarily be IP capable or as IP capable as it needs to be, it's still good business to milk that legacy.
Yeah.
So how do you start to make those kinds of inroads in a culture, quite frankly, that's kind of old like me, that is so averse to change?
Well, what you do is you come here to this show and you go to Sprocket and you find Harry Glazer and say, go find all these people and bring them by our booth so we can educate them. I mean, this is kind of what we're at. We're evangelists here, telling people this is what's happening. It's kind of funny. The cloud does a little bit of disservice because people go, I'm just going to store it in the cloud. And then they get the bill and they go, wow, I didn't understand that I'm paying 3 cents a gigabyte just for it to sit in the cloud.
Exactly.
And you start doing the math, you realize I could have stood up my own server and done it cheaper, better myself. So it's a matter of people have to be aware of what they're paying. They have to understand what the alternatives are, because there's some really great things out there, and they got to be willing to invest and do it.
So NAB 2019, what are your expectations at NAB 2019? And you're a young guy, so you're going to be around here when I'm sucking pina coladas in 5 years.
I like that.
Or less.
Maybe I'll join you.
What do you think you're going to be doing in your subject matter expertise and in the storage world 5 years at NAB 2024?
Well, so this event, like you said, SPROCKIT, this is all about evangelizing. There are so many new and innovative ways to do what we do on a daily basis that we don't know about. You've got your good old-fashioned, wrought iron, if you want to call it, that's sitting in all these people's data centers. So for me, 5 years from now, it's to see people using things more efficiently. I'm all about call it global whatever, but more efficient use of the assets they actually have and understanding how to use them more appropriately. The problem we had with tape and hard drives from the day is everything was spinning, and so the entire world is spinning. The SPROCKIT logo is spinning. I want to see everything straight and flat.
So what's going to constitute success for you at NAB 2019?
For me here, it's to get people understanding what we're doing and to find a few folks that are willing to take a look at some new technology. Because the hard part, especially when it comes to old school versus new school, is nobody wants to be the first one to take the major leap. So I'm looking for that rising star company partner where I can say, here's something really cool, let's work on this together, bring it to market and show off to everybody why it's better, and then we both get to run down the court with the torch saying, hey, look, we did it first.
Stephen, that's kind of the success of NAB 2019 being that evangelist?
You mentioned that you put the enterprise SSD in 2008. I mean, folks, that was 10 years ago. My previous job, I worked at Intel, and I can remember when Intel started going to PC manufacturers saying, stop spinning this in here, let's move to the SSD. And everybody said no, because we've been doing it this way for 10, 15 years, and now you can't find a PC with a spinning disk in it, right? Exactly. So it happens, and it happens by people like ourselves. So in 5 years, I'm going to be kind of a corner booth, a little bit bigger, and more staff here, so that I don't have to work all the shifts myself.
I like that. Exactly, yeah. We'll have our own booth the size of SPROCKIT in 5 years.
All right. Questions. We'll take a couple. We've got maybe a minute or two. One question.
You're doing silicon, you're doing plastic, so
green side of it? The green side. Okay. So the question was, what is the eco side of our business for the green side of it? So a couple of things about an optical disc is when it's in a data center, it can be cold. I mean, it does not need to be powered. It does not need to be spun. It does not need, the data center itself does not need to be cooled. Our discs run in 85 degrees centigrade, 85% relative humidity. And when you need it, you spin it up and you go. So you save, think of all that power. When you look at the data centers of today, it's all about megawatts. How many megawatts of power can you bring into it? And so, and a lot of that is just idly spinning disks. Hard disks spin full time for years and years and years, whether they're being used or not. And so from my standpoint is big savings in power, big savings in cooling in the data center, and, the polymer material, we can get into that if you want to get into chemistry.
And then from my perspective on the silicon side, I put a lot more in a smaller package, so I give you density at the same power envelope. So if you're talking about racks and racks of servers, I can reduce the footprint in the data center by a third just by changing out all of the disks that are 2, 3, 4 terabytes a piece, drop in a 32 terabyte drive, and I've just taken an entire rack of servers out. So it's digital footprint and power.
Yeah, power consumption. Yeah, power consumption is huge, huge, huge.
There was a statistic that the Facebook data center in the cornfields of Iowa is driving as much power as the entire city of New York. Being able to reduce that footprint in some way, some meaningful way, while giving better access to data, more efficient access to data, and better ways to store the data long term, it creates an amazing TCO model that just people are really starting to get the head shake like you're doing now. So.
Yeah, I mean, in China, they built a dam, and it produces 100 megawatts of power, and it's not just doesn't give anything to the consumer, it's to power 7 data centers that are right there. And so, people build these now in places that are naturally cool, naturally dry, and real quick access to power, because that's what it's all about.
So when you guys are not hanging at the Sprocket area, where are you? Tell the folks where you're hanging out, and maybe they'll catch up with you.
Since my little show toys have to plug into something to work, I have a couple of partner booths down in the South Hall. I've got a 288 terabyte 1U server, and I've got a 1 petabyte 2U server sitting in partner booths down in South Lower.
How about you, Stephen?
Well, if I'm not at my little kiosk, then I'm going to be drifting over somewhere where the basketball game is, where I can get a bucket of beer for $25.
There you go.
Come join
Texas
me.
Tech. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Steal my PC. All right, you guys can go home. That's fun with that. I always tell people I'm terrible. I think Caldwell might be the best sales executive. Hey, Raj, how are you, man? Good to see you. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for showing up.
Yeah, it's really nice to meet you. Yeah.
Jeff, come to see us. How are you?
Good. Busy already. I've been here 23
I'm awake.
I know, me too. I didn't
A month.
It's dog ears.
No, he is really.
I'm pretty dang good for doing all that.
Let's take a picture. I'm going to do it right now.
Wait. Hold on.
Okay. I'll be right back.
2 seconds.
I didn't know he was going to wait.
Yeah, 2 seconds.
Geez, that didn't work out so well. Okay, I think I'm going to hold it like here. Can you hear me back? Are you good? Everybody good? Okay, cool. My name's Diana Wilkin. I have a consulting company. I've been in broadcast space for most of my life. Network, local stations, and I have the opportunity today to be monitoring this really awesome panel. And what we're going to be talking about is addressable advertising, and ways that that is being monetized, and really some unique ways to take that content, get more value out of existing inventory, as well as creating more opportunities to distribute content through various channels. So, first thing I'd like to do, because we do have a little bit of a time constraint, and this isn't about me, I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves, give you a little bit, kind of a nickel tour of what they do, and then we'll get into some questions. Jeff.
Great. Hi, I'm Jeff Wallenitz. I work at Freewheel, Comcast company. I've been there about 4.5 years now. Freewheel primarily is power the TV ecosystem, right? So it's pitch-to-pay solutions for ad serving across multi-platform distribution. So not just traditional digital IP environments, but also OTT, set-top box VOD, and now linear addressable as well.
Good morning. I'm Roger Franklin with Crystal. And Crystal, at this point, is we do two things. One is monitor and control systems for video distribution networks. Been doing that for a while. And more importantly, today, and pertinent to this panel, we provide unified signaling to mark ad breaks in individual ads for any platform. So it goes into a programmer, and then companies like Freewheel can grab those signals, replace ads, enhance them, and increase the value of that ad inventory.
Great. Gio.
Yes, my name is Gio, CEO of Stream Media. We help content providers do three things: distribute content, engage with end users, and monetize.
Hi, I'm Scott Stansfield, founder of Centerply. Centerply operates a platform where we enable brands or publishers to assess the value of linear TV inventory for fulfilling advanced advertising communication goals. So we answer two questions for linear TV owners. Question one is, what's their inventory worth in the advanced advertising space? And then how do they compile proposals so that they're competitive and compelling to reach the communication goals in that new emerging arena?
So all of you, and what's interesting about this group up here today, all members of SPROCKIT, but companies that have a long history. So all of them are working with Fortune 500 companies, which puts them in kind of a unique position. What I'd like to know from each of you, and feel free to, whoever would like to speak, who is excelling at this, why and how? So advanced advertising has, 500 players in it right now. So how do you see that moving forward, and where do you see this really the opportunity for, particularly for broadcast. I know that in the NVPD world, internationally with Geo, you've all found these really unique ways to increase the value of their inventory. In the linear world, it's a lot tougher challenge. So I'd like to hear from each of you how you address that and really who's making progress there and how will that evolve from the world we're in with 1.0 towards a world of 3.0.
I'll jump in if that's okay. 80% of the viewers of television are watching one of those big four networks on local TV stations. And I see Rich in the audience. He can attest to the fact that these networks don't like to do things differently one year after another because there are literally billions of dollars riding on their content. And you can just look at the Super Bowl, $400 million day, $500 million day. They don't want to screw that up at all. So they are very slow to evolve. With that said, there are some leaders. There are some companies, some broadcasters, companies like Weigel that are looking at how do I take ATSC 3.0 business cases and apply them to ATSC 1.0 over-the-air transmissions. There are some networks, I hate to say it, but the Fox-Disney deal kind of slowed Fox down a little bit. You can imagine they were distracted. That company has always been at the forefront of a lot of the advancements in the technologies and distribution space. Companies like CBS, they're hitting all access extremely hard. They see a big push in the OTT streaming space, and they're probably the leader in that space today. So there is some movement, and there are some companies that are leading. None of them are quite where they should be at this point, but they're working up there. Hearst is another broadcaster that seems to be pretty active out there and looking at ways to do advanced advertising. They joined the Open Addressable Ready group for ad replacement on smart TVs, and they seem to be moving along very well.
Speaking of that leads me, good lead in. Jeff had an announcement today with Hearst. I don't know if you all have seen it, but maybe you could talk a little bit about that and how your company is working with them in this space.
Yeah, it's a really exciting deal. Hearst has tapped us to run the Hearst AnyStream product, which is their OTT streaming product. So from our perspective, that manifests itself a couple different ways, right? So one question is, how is a company like Hearst one of the leaders in the notion of how you're trying to find a way to get better at advanced advertising, which I think means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And specifically in this case, we're talking about how are we getting smarter about finding the right ways to get our content out there and then making sure that we have the right ads showing to the right people at the right time on the right platform, in this case OTT, but also across. This OTT is a prelude to what we'll ultimately be doing with them, which is tapping into their linear TV inventory as well to deliver addressable solutions there. So it's paving the way for a lot of different things, not just over-the-air delivery from an addressable perspective, but also how you're leveraging a new platform that's growing like crazy. We just released our Q4 VMR last week, which is showing just double-digit growth, mid-double-digit growth again, year over year and quarter over quarter in the OTT space. Taking those learnings and that ability and that technology, delivering it through IP channels, and making sure that we're getting them the content they need. And also finding them the audiences that they need, right? Because it's not just about how you're putting the content out there and then who you're delivering that advertising to, making sure that the audience extension piece is working as well. So how are you finding audience for that unique demand that's not just in Comcast markets, but they're in 39 states, 26 markets. It's a very, very large, expansive opportunity for them.
Well, that kind of gives me the opportunity to talk to Scott a little bit, who we spoke a little bit earlier about that very fact of how do you reach those people that you want to target those ads with. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about your views on that topic?
Thank you, yeah. So in tying it into what's happening with the growth of monetization of the linear television inventory, where I see for our clients, where it's growing in terms of utility is the holding companies have kind of gotten their arms around what is advanced advertising and how do they tie the different silos together. And they're creating a common perspective and language and metric that ties the various units together. For the last couple of years, it's been very siloed, and the agencies are reestablishing themselves as driving that conversation. And one of the things that they do find is that advanced advertising defined not necessarily as the delivery mechanism, but as the analytics and the perspective. They are finding that linear TV is a very important element for extended reach. It's not the answer. There are a tremendous amount of learnings that have come out of digital, out of addressable and OTT, CTV, but they are finding if they can take those learnings and that perspective and then apply that perspective to the linear TV inventory, they can craft more holistic solutions.
Which is the majority of value. Linear still got the money.
Well, that's true, and I think also that what's I'm not going to predict when the acceleration happens, but the acceleration, it makes sense because we're finding that the linear TV inventory is tremendously valuable, but it's hard to get at when you're trying to do things with speed and scale that advanced advertising requires. And but on the positive side, very importantly, linear TV owners are finding that they're able to get added value, enhanced value, high value for their inventory. It's no longer the days of give me your remnant and turn nickels into dimes. It's taking inventory and getting equal market value or higher value, and they're able to take this inventory and tap into the national advertising window at agencies and brands and not just play in the spot market.
And now, Gio, you've got a little bit different product and approach. So we talked a little bit about the advanced advertising side. Share with everyone what you're doing and how you're creating the opportunity to monetize through really more channel opportunities.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not only about the big guys, the big companies out there. We look at the small to medium-sized content providers. They have to monetize as well, right? And how they're going to do that if they're very limited in terms of staff, or limited in terms of digital department. So we believe that monetization should come also through gamification. You got to start thinking outside the box. It's not the same way of doing advertisement. Some of the things that we've done in the advertisement space, we replaced skip ads. Just think about it 1 second. Pre-rolls is boring. Mid-roll is boring. No? And thanks to Facebook partner of ours, we are being bombarded by this mid-roll. So we started thinking outside the box, and we said, small to medium size, they need to survive. We need to help them go to OTT, which we were talking about before. We need to help them create new forms of engagement, but we need to change the monetization scheme. So it's about thinking outside the box and also helping the small to medium sized company making that jump, that leap into digital.
So particularly in your case, and really for everyone, how broadcast companies, we'll talk about linear broadcast delivery, have workflows that are very entrenched and have a lot of legacy, not just systems, but value, right? And so one of the, in the past few years, the fears, I think, of that world is that by sort of segregating out all this inventory, and A, we create way too much work, B, we don't have the manpower to do it, C, we might just devalue our inventory. So how are you all addressing sort of that workflow issue within these organizations?
So that's, I think, very astute. And so I think the key word here for me is incrementalism. I think the notion here that people think of addressable as this sort of holy grail, that it's going to solve all of their business problems. And what it is really is just a quiver. It's just another arrow in your quiver. How are you approaching the market to achieve a marketer's goal to a given consumer? So there's two ways to do that. One is to not disrupt the workflow. One is to find the right way to integrate with that workflow, which is one of the things we're doing with our sister company, NBC, in a linear schedule optimization pilot, which is we're actually talking to their legacy Syntech, their operative system, in order to make smarter recommendations through our ad serving brain. So rather than letting operative, which what we're doing is instructing operative to fill those breaks, and then they're actually delivering the ads. So the workflow remains the same. The only thing is we're incrementally adding to that. And the same thing, I think, applies to the way people should use addressable advertising, right? What are the right situations? What are the right ways to find consumer value against an addressable ad and target that? It can't be all of it, because as someone made the point up here, it's escaping. Slept like 4 hours last night, so forgive me. But I think
we all did.
Totally, and not the way you think, in a very bad way. you want to make sure that you're not actually taking away the biggest advantage that linear television has, which is scale. You want to find the right way to leverage that scale in an intelligent way, find the right opportunities to be addressable with your advertising, and target those. Because otherwise, what you're going to find is there's tons and tons of waste that's being exposed, and it's not going to be the right value proposition for the people who own the advertising time.
So let me just jump in and follow up with Jeff, and I want to absolutely agree that incrementalism is the name of the game, and that's how it's going to work. But I think that first, the owners need to see that their inventory is not going to be devalued, and that's a matter of looking at the CPMs that are being paid in advanced advertising today. They're higher, not lower, so they're there. Advertisers and brands are willing to pay a premium for better targeted advertising. So that's now been established, and that's not really a concern. In terms of that incremental build, there is the challenge of making systems interoperate. But what we find is that often it's more a matter of incumbencies. Are protective of control over the inventory. That is very, very important, and there's two elements to that. One is the individuals that control the inventory yesterday may want to control that inventory tomorrow. If they're shown that the way that they control the inventory is consistent with the underlying values, then they're going to buy into the new system. And that's where that extreme pushback of going to auction-based pricing on linear television inventory didn't fly. It's never going to fly. But I don't think it's so much the technical challenges as trust and winning over those that control the inventory in an incremental fashion.
Education. This big education.
Education is what we spend most of our time on. Absolutely.
And so how do you demonstrate to them that the value isn't being threatened, that it's being increased?
Well, I mean, one thing to be aware of is, unlike the internet, where there's a virtually unlimited number of websites that can display ads, the ad inventory in the broadcast environment is finite. And when you have a finite supply, you can control pricing a little bit. And going to the incremental, addressable advertising is kind of the holy grail, but there are some issues that have to be dealt with first. Crystal firmly believes that you can't enhance or replace an ad if you don't know where it is, which is why we integrate with existing systems, existing workflows, and give control to the broadcasters and programmers as to who gets that information, so that they can work those deals appropriately. One interesting minor step is a simple ad enhancement. This is displaying the local agent for State Farm on a State Farm ad. You're not asking anybody to sell anything more. You're just adding some information on top of the ad at the right time. The other point is on rated programs. You can't replace an ad that a marketer like Ford or Toyota has purchased with a different marketer, because that's going to screw up the Nielsen ratings. So you have to be able to add in the ability for that one marketer to deliver multiple copies of their ad spot, whether it's Toyota delivering a Tundra truck to one house and a Camry car to another house, it's still Toyota. And so those are the incremental steps that we are going to see. And you need to have the right signals. You need to have the right systems in place. And where the workflow does change is on the ad sales side, on the ad delivery side, to make sure those ads are staged at the right point in the distribution path. But from a technical workflow on regular distribution, you won't go change broadcasters. You won't get them to do things much different than they've been doing, because of the billions of dollars that are currently flowing through their systems.
So I wanted to add one more thing. So we believe we're big disruptors. So one of the things that we try to do is give our content providers the power of controlling CPM, which is something completely different and new, where it gives them the possibility to go direct to the brands and set the price, so that they don't have to go through certain models where there's a constant auction on the CPM pricing. So we try to be more disruptive that way. We're trying different models in order to address the inventories out there.
You know, I just want to weigh in with that there isn't a need today to wait for technological advances. Those advances will enhance the inventory value down the road, but it can be done today. And so your question about how can media owners be encouraged and convinced that it will work is using existing channels today, they can start putting their inventory in. And the nice thing about advanced advertising is it's not built on packages the way advertising was done yesterday. If they put their inventory into consideration, they're going to generate ad revenue from that. They don't need to put all their inventory in. They don't need to put half of their inventory in. They don't need to carve off the remnant inventory. It works today. There does need to be a comfort level. That's key, but it's not like we're waiting for technology to happen. The technology's in place. It's a matter of the trust and the encouragement, and that's what's happening this year.
Yeah, that's right. I would argue that the technology is largely in place. I mean, Freewheel is delivering addressable advertising right now, and by the end of the year, we'll have 23 million homes addressable. Not just in the Comcast footprint, but in other footprints also. So the technology is largely there. We also have technology that can deliver multiple variants of a given creative if that's what's necessary. I think it's largely trust, education, and standardization, I think, is the large thing, and that's what Project OAR is meant to do, right? How are we standardizing delivery? How are we standardizing specifications? How are we standardizing measurement? Those things. That's big. That is a big open question. And how we can do those things is also true. But the technology and that foundation is largely in place. So I don't want to look past that.
Right. That standardization is key because we've come through a number of years where things were all over the map, and everyone was experimental and trying new ways to measure and value, and the metrics that were relevant were not established. There is a danger that we all want to be cognizant of. If we over-standardize, we'll stifle the creativity. So, yes, things need to be standardized so that different media channels can be compared one to another and blended so that 1 + 1 = 3.
And you can measure it.
Right, but at the same time, we want to be flexible because we're coming out of a system that was in place for 40 years. And it got a little bit ossified and wasn't able to move nimbly to take advantage of all these new data sources and capabilities and technologies. And so, yes, standardization, but standardization with ongoing flexibility, I think is a roadmap that we all want to follow.
There's one other thing here that one more, which is data privacy and consent to use data is going to be very, very important here. So with CCPA, it's sort of an open question as to whether that's going to come into effect on January 1st. But with CCPA or some federal regulation probably coming, if not behind that, we're going to need to make sure that we have the right data consent structures in place and the right ability to leverage the data we know that we have consent to use. And that will be very, very informative around how we deliver addressable advertising in the future.
So how far away, and you get out your little magic 8-ball, how far away do you think we are from that world where there are enough standards in place so that this is more a matter of I'm going to choose to work with that guy because that's the product I like, but all these other things are standardized, from privacy to measurement to all of the sort of basics you want to have?
So I'm sort of saving my major predictions for the sports book. However, I don't think it's any further than 12 to 24 months away. I think most of this stuff is going to begin to settle into place, especially when you have a bunch of companies signed on with a willingness. I think, actually, Scott, you made a fantastic point, which is that we don't want to make sure that these things are calcifying around a very specific set of standards that don't have the kind of fluidity that you need in order to deliver in the marketplace. If we get 50% of it right out of the box, you don't want to let perfect be the enemy of good, right? You want to make sure that you're getting what you can in place and then evolving as the platform evolves. But just to answer the question directly, we're 1 to 2 years away, I think.
I think we're going to start seeing some testing of those standards before the end of this year, and to see how tight they need to be or how loose they can be, and then full implementation sometime next year, beginning.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we have a lot of customers down in South America where I see it very far away.
Geo's very worldwide.
Yeah, a little bit global. So in down south, it's an open game right now.
I would say the demand side, holding companies, some of the larger agencies have done what's necessary to really expand the flow of funds through the advanced advertising arena. So that's in place. What hasn't been confirmed is how prepared the TV owners are for this. I know some of them have had some consolidation, and there may be challenges with tapping into inventory and kind of a standardized internally for them, so that they can serve up the inventory. And how do they control that inventory management? I don't have a lot of insight into that, but that is something that could constrain. On the other hand, they have the opportunity to put in portions of their inventory. They don't need to go enterprise-wide, but making the inventory available and controlling it in a fashion that they're comfortable with. How much do you feed in? How quickly do you feed into it? What kind of data science is behind that for optimization of their monetizing of their own inventory? They need to have that in place, and I know some of the operations out there are where they need to be. Others maybe not. We just don't know who's where they're ready to take advantage of it.
Right. Well,
I do want to say though, not every group needs to pile in. This is not like we're all going to get in the canoe together and sing Kumbaya. One at a time they can come in, because the inventory doesn't need to be pooled as an overall industry. It's whoever wants to make it available to the advanced advertising demand side can do that in pieces.
And I would assume, with this deal you've just announced with Hearst, there will be sort of a rollout, I would assume, in that fashion of sort of one step at a time when it comes to the linear side of integration.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, there's I think it's been very, very encouraging across the industry, generally speaking, over the last few years, where people are beginning to kind of unify around consortiums. So NCC is doing the same thing, and that's not just across Comcast, Cox, and Charter. The idea is, how can you also get AT&T DirecTV on board? How can you get Frontier involved in that? How can you get people aligned around the notion that if you want to deliver a national footprint, this is the way to do it, right? Get together, agree on a set of standards, and go to market. It's not collusive. It's easier, right? You're making it frictionless.
Framework.
Yes, exactly. So what you want to do, if the goal is ease of buying for a marketer to reach an intended consumer, the way to do that is to align around a certain set of goals. And if people in the industry are loosely confederated around those, that makes sense. So whether it's something like OAR or NCC or Canoe or something else, to that end, it makes it a lot easier to do what you want to do.
There's an analogy that's right in front of us that we can look at. And I'm not sure it is directly applicable, but if you look at OTT, went from a trickle to a stampede in a year. The same could occur in the linear space when the standards became, the perspective became accepted. Mm-hmm. Brands were more than happy once they knew what they were getting to put those dollars into the advanced TV and the OTT space. And so when it's proven, brands are very anxious. They're very anxious to do something that is going to get more bang for their buck. They're not holding back.
Great. Well, we are. I just had the hook come from the side to pull us off stage. So everybody here I think will be here for a little bit. Jeff may be a little busy with his announcement, but feel free to grab everybody afterwards, ask specific questions, get to know each of the companies, and thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your spending it with us.
Jeff is coming out to see you guys.
me know how it goes. Good to see you. Hi. Wow, great. Fantastic. Amazing. Awesome. That's great. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I'm thrilled. I like it's like sort of I'm very, very, very happy. I'm really, really excited. It's going to be good.
Yeah, they did. It was good. Very good.
Oh, I know. I could talk about all this. I know. 30 minutes is
Yeah, it's not quite enough for that.
Watching tonight for us?
Okay, check. Hi, everybody. How you doing? I love your red hat. It's fantastic. You want to do a little, that's very good. Can you all hear me and or us? Yeah, I know it's going to be a challenge. If there's something you can't hear or, you have a further question about and you, for whatever reason, can't get it answered now or here, we'll obviously be very happy to chat with you after our fun-filled session, which begins now. My name is Tim Hanlon. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Verter Group, which is a strategic consulting and advisory firm based in Chicago, former and recovering agency guy, focused on lots of emerging media technologies over the years, lots of interesting startups, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think I have been responsible for 12 or 13 of the startups that have been part of this program for the last 5 or 6 years. So not that there's any financial benefit from that, but hopefully some good stuff that comes out of it. I'm joined by a really cool panel, and we're going to be discussing this issue of sort of cross-screenness and cross-screen stuff. That's the television environment, that's the digital video environment, that's the over-the-top video environment, that's all of those environments and then some. Throw in a mobile device, you throw in a laptop, you throw in all those kinds of things. There's a commingling that is not only possible, but arguably already starting to occur. And all of these firms, in one way, shape, or form, are helping sort of bring some of that to light. Now, one thing I'm going to sort of throw out here as we get into it, some of this is going to sound, especially to some of you grizzled veterans in the audience, like this is sort of everything old is new again. You're going to hear terms like interactive television and interactivity and engagement. I think those things are just universal, persistent, constant. I think they're just coming in new forms and arguably maybe more mainstream possibilities of such in this next generation of technology. That's my thesis, at least. Let's see if we can challenge that. I'm going to let our first 3 SPROCKIT startup companies introduce themselves, and then I'm going to let our recent guest from Freewheel identify herself, and we're going to kind of just talk about sort of the early stage and sort of the later stage company viewpoints about all this stuff. And it'll be a party. Just wait. And that hat is, again, it's awesome.
I approve of your fashion choice.
There you go. So Dan, why don't you get us kicked off? Who are you and where are you from?
My name is Dan Albritton. I'm the founder and CEO of Megaphone TV. We are a Manhattan-based viewer engagement platform mostly for live video. We do audience polling, trivia, social media, and interactive advertising all around the broadcast. We work with 70 local newsrooms. We work with, 20 or 30 or 40 international broadcasters and a bunch of online broadcasters as well. Anywhere you've got live video, you're producing it or distributing it, our lightweight platform can sit inside your video and engage your audience. And a big focus for us, one of the things we're talking about a lot here at NAB, is interactive journalism. So we have a number of different news gathering customers who are bringing audience opinion into the show, and then that's affecting the news cycle. So I'll give a brief example so people can understand what I'm talking about. Recently, our broadcast partner WXYZ in Detroit did a report that in Comerica Park in Detroit, there is a Chevy Blazer on display. The Chevy Blazer is no longer made in Detroit, it is currently made in Mexico. So the question was, hey, Detroiters, what do you think about this Blazer being displayed here now? And it was such an overwhelming poll over so many days, over so many newscasts, that WXYZ actually went to GM and said, you know what? This is a burgeoning story, and here's the audience opinion. What do you think about this? And GM actually said, wow, it's really terrible. We feel bad about this. It's kind of a stain on our reputation. They've now taken the Blazer out, and they have replaced it with a car that is made in Detroit. A perfect example of how audience opinion comes into the broadcast, becomes part of the news cycle, and affects the real world. We got many other examples we can talk about like that, but I think that's kind of a good heavyweight example.
So we're going to talk about sort of the consumer experience in a second, which you kind of just gave us a bit, but I want to just ask you a pointed question on that. Do you see yourselves as primarily and or exclusively a journalistic, if you will, business enhancement? Or is that just one sort of good example?
So maybe go meta on that. We say, let's make great television content of a new type. Interactivity. So we do a lot of, like, for instance, play-along trivia shows. That's a game show. So it's not really news gathering. So we'd say enhance whatever the underlying program is with the kind of interactivity that it natively wants. And then on the back of that, actually, there's monetization opportunities. So I would say we are primarily a production enhancement tool that can generate revenue.
Got it. Awesome. Deborah, welcome.
Hi, I'm Deborah Prywis. I am the Chief Product Officer at Applicaster. Our main product is Zap. It is an app building and management tool for creating direct-to-consumer apps for the entertainment space. So we are across mobile, OTT, connected TV. And in my world, we have a unique architecture with the goal of really future-proofing how to reach audiences and how to connect with audiences. So there's been a lot of change in the industry. I think, as you were saying, everything old is new again. Change is a constant. And my mission for our platform is to make sure that we're future-proof so that you can change quickly. In our world, we wrap native SDKs with a pluggable infrastructure, and then everything else becomes a plugin. So UI, UX, back-end analytics providers, second screen experiences, anything that goes into creating an engaging experience with your app and the way that you want to speak with your audiences is a plugin that would be found in our marketplace and added into our product.
So who functionally are you targeting when you're quote-unquote selling and or at least exposing this narrative-bending possibility?
Yeah. So at the moment, we work with media companies large and small. We work with, big enterprise networks where we do tens of apps for them across all of the platforms, as well as new media companies that have built their brand on Facebook and YouTube. And it's really, it's amazing to sit at that intersection because both bring something to the table and are part of our network, and we're able to help share those best practices across the board. Predominantly, we're working with CTOs, digital teams, product teams, but this is one of the things that I'm hoping to change because I think that right now we're working that way because making an app is hard. It used to be a million years ago, you needed a computer science degree to make a website. And that was me. I actually took one of those early HTML classes as I pursued a short-lived computer science major. I moved into cognitive science. But this is what we're doing for apps. So because we're able to bring in plugins, we initially started doing this just for ourselves. So we could scale, so that we could shorten time to market and have our developers do the work once and then just come in to support it as necessarily. And we realize there's a business here. There's a way to scale for our customers and have our customers start building their own apps as well. So my goal is that we need to make it easy enough and accessible for marketing teams to come into the platform. So we have different roles. Right now, within our company, we have our designers using it. We have people, able to change what's promoted, what feeds are being shown. All of this is done remotely via APIs. We want it to be adaptable, right? To be able to change easily. So, a designer would come in, determine the layout, add in the branding elements. The marketing team should decide what's being promoted at any given moment. It's very easy to swap out feeds, swap out, maybe you have a hero at the top. The show that you're promoting is ended and you want to have more of a general list. We've really drilled down into atomic design to have the basic components of making an app. So the same way that you can make anything from a box of Legos, and there's probably fewer than 20 different types of Legos, this is what we're bringing to the app building space from a front-end perspective with how it looks and feels, as well as to a back-end perspective where anything powering your business can become a plug-in to power your app.
Thank you. Gabriel.
Hello everybody, my name is Gabriel Baños. I'm the founder and CEO of Flowix. We are an audience participation platform. Company is headquartered in Buenos Aires, Argentina, but we got offices in Brazil, Mexico, Spain, and now coming soon in Miami as part of our first office in the US. We work with more than 50 broadcasters and streamers in these markets, and we help them to attract, retain, and monetize their audiences on a variety of digital environments, from social media, websites, apps, or even live streaming. We like to think of ourselves as the platform that helps to bridge the gap that we see today between the traditional TV production teams and the new digital teams, and especially to break the silos between, again, maybe the broadcast operations and the traditional broadcast world and the new digital world. So Flowix helps to create multi-platform participation mechanics, whether producers can get the freedom to publish polls or different type of participation mechanics on the broadcaster website without having to ask permission to the digital teams or without needing any IT intervention for that. That's a big pain that we see these days still in many organizations, that this collaboration that we should see between digital and production teams is not as smooth as it should be. So we like to help to make it smooth and to break those silos. We also make it very easy, for example, to author graphics for TV or for live streaming. That's another pain that we see in the industry, that the technology or the skills required to build interactive graphics for live shows or for scripted shows or for live streaming usually require a very skilled person with knowledge or maybe a character generator system. So we built our own HTML5 graphics builder in which you can author graphics for these environments without any special skills.
So this is almost basically a better way, a more streamlined way to get stuff from application, interaction, consumer usage into the truck, so to speak, to either be directly or indirectly decisions on screen or
correct, yeah.
Moved.
If you are producing a show in the control room with the traditional equipment and systems that you use in that case, we got integrations with any CG, for example. But if you are producing a live show or for live streaming and you don't have all that gear available and you are on a truck, well, we also make it very easy with our tools to integrate all in participation on air without requiring special equipment for that.
Got it. All right. Well, so Sarah, I'm going to use you not only as a wrap-up of this particular discussion, but also maybe as the jumping off point to the consumer experience part of our dialogue, right? We've both seen these things over and over again, right?
Yes, we have.
Do consumers want to do this, and or how are they engaging in this kind of stuff from your perspective at Freewheel?
Okay,
and other places, by the way.
Yes. So first off, Freewheel, for many of you who were at the last panel, Jeff introduced us. We like to say we're the center of premium video economy. Why? Because we actually connect in a frictionless environment. The demand side, agencies, advertisers, marketers, directly to the content owners, the programmers, the publishers, and we do so globally through a number of solutions. Why? Because Freewheel, which is a Comcast-owned company, is actually a roll-up of 5 startups like you guys were, right? So we're connecting the dots, but we're connecting the dots from, I think, the position of where the core revenue still sits today, which is premium video. Right? And so everyone wants high engagement. Everyone is chasing where consumers are because we know that consumers want to interact. They want to find things in apps wherever and whatever device they actually have. And they want to do so with the content with high production values that make them feel like they're part of the program and the show. What's challenging with that? How do you make money from chasing them in all of the different places when, frankly, every single one of us as consumers is interacting with our content in different ways? There is no such thing as a standard ecosystem or workflow or standard consumer anymore, right? So the consumer experience, from our view, working with not only startup content providers, native digital folks, OTT, but also global behemoths, Comcast, Sky, Fox, Disney, what have you, is how do we get as flexible as possible to protect the core business today, but experiment and try multiple ways of engagement as quickly as possible as we see consumers really develop their own way of how they want to find the brand and the programming wherever and on whatever device they need.
So I want to juxtapose that thought, right, and then re-engage you guys down the road here. So it's interesting. You look at, say, what a Twitter does with their video, right, or a Facebook Watch, or YouTube for that matter, right? And I think of Twitter in its evolution, right, where a lot of the consumer engagement is you can see that there are 72 other people watching the same live stream, or now it's 73, it went down to 71, and there are a lot of hearts going all over the screen showing, wow, that's cool, and maybe, worse off, a lot of chatter from various naysayers that are interrupting or arguably could be misconstrued as engagement, but is literally toxic waste and opinion. Okay, so let me just ask you this. What do consumers want to do relative to, let's call it premium video / television? Is it just to heart something on a screen and be sort of anonymously remunerated as such, which is really nothing? Or is it more than that, which it sounds like all of you are trying to make happen? Yeah?
So I think that the first thing we need to understand is that consumers are not alike. There is a full range of consumers and what they expect in terms of interactivity. Not all viewers are actually willing to interact with live content. And some are viewers on the other end, they are really eager to interact with the show. So we need to build products and build solutions that enable content creators, streamers or broadcasters to personalize that interactivity and even to make it optional. You talk about the case of Facebook Watch. Facebook Watch, you can decide if you want to see those reactions flying around your video and if you want to engage with polls or not. If you don't want to have that experience, you can turn it off, and that's fine. So if you prefer to have like a zombie-like experience and just consuming content without any interactivity, that's fine. But if you prefer to be actively engaging with that video, that's also fine. So we need to think and speak about ourselves as developers of solutions for this industry. We need to think of these cases in we need to make interactivity more personalized. We need customized to each of these consumers.
I actually take a different view of that. obviously everybody's an individual, but I focus much more on content type than on
my next question.
An individual person, right? So we do a lot of political debates. If you have a political debate and you want to say, what's the most important topic that we're going to debate tonight? An audience who's watching a political debate obviously cares. They're going to vote heavily on that, right? So at Megaphone, we focus almost entirely on meaningful interactivity. And that means that the audience has some kind of output that they care about. A political debate is obvious, right? And in some cases, you can actually guide the debate. You can say, this person is winning, or this person should get more time, or I don't believe what that candidate just said, and now I'm going to have them re-explain it, right? So if you can reach through your TV and affect the show, it doesn't matter what type of person you are attracted to that content. Therefore, we want you to engage with that content in the best way that fits the content. If we're making a trivia game show, we have a lot of game shows running. Obviously, you want to be able to play along with the game show, and win a prize at home. In a lot of cases for our game shows, there's no studio audience, there's no studio components, the people at home playing and winning. So I think when we look at this, we have a series of content verticals, and our production team will say, all right, what kind of content are you doing? Great, here's 30 different obviously good user patterns or interaction models that fit with your type of content, and then from there we customize it to the specific show itself.
What kind of content are you seeing more or less of, shall we say?
My take on all of this is that consumers just want convenience, and I think that you can't take people and pigeonhole them into these various boxes. At the end of the day, if you look at the history of video content, I was researching this, actually. The first television transmission was sent in 1927. So that was fewer than 100 years ago, and if you look at how this has changed over time, people have, you now have an on-demand, on-the-go proliferation of content world where people want what they want it, how they want it, where they want it. People are interacting with media brands across a variety of devices, a variety of platforms over the course of a given day. So what we're seeing is really more from the media brand perspective of wanting to make sure that they are everywhere their audience is. It's about being discoverable. It's about being ubiquitous, which can get very expensive. So one of the reasons that we've built out our platform in the way that we have is to make it efficient to scale. We are all over the world. We've entered different markets at different stages of maturity. And what's very interesting is, we very often come in to fill gaps in a media strategy. If a company is all set on Android and iOS, but less so on OTT, that's a gap that we can come in and fill with them. And if they're experienced in making apps, they see how much easier that we're able to make it. We handle the maintenance. They can spend their time making plugins to add product features and functionality, bring in different advertisers, different revenue streams, and experiment there even. So for example, in terms of monetization, people usually turn to advertising first. But there is, there's video advertising, multiple ways to do that, display advertising, multiple ways to do that, pay-per-view, subscription, contests, sponsorships. And what's important is to follow these changing consumer tastes and make sure that you are everywhere they want to be and using these tools appropriately as tools in your toolkit.
So let me go to Sarah on this one. So it seems to me, so you say changing consumer taste. I want to jump off on that because it does seem to me that television and premium video, or some combination thereof, is being pushed by newer ways of dissemination of content and such as something like a Twitch, right? Or e-gaming platforms, right, where the immersion and the interconnectivity and or interaction is not only fierce, but it's also, frankly, expected, right? The content interaction is actually an expected part of the content itself, right? So I think what we've kind of described is a little bit of ginger movement towards that from a legacy television lean-back perspective. To your point, Gabriel, some people want it, some people don't. But it seems to me like there's a whole generation of younger kids, literally, who are, that's almost their first experience with television and video is maybe through a gaming console, right? Are you seeing some of that sort of blur, and does that either wreck or improve the business models behind this?
I think it's a combination of both. I think it's improving, and I think it's wrecking. And I think it's wrecking the things that actually probably need to be wrecked, because what we're talking about is consumers want to find the content or the brands as easily discoverable as possible. So that means we need to enable that not only from a technology perspective, but then when we create that content, we have to have passive and interactive in mind. That's how we can actually afford to reach the consumer. And I think the other really important part is even for younger kids who are doing it through the Xbox, right? Who the concept of cross-screen does not exist. It's a screen, it's going to have content, and I'm going to find whatever content I want, whether it's my phone or on the Xbox or sitting with mom and dad. It's all about making sure that not only do we have something that's relevant, but at that moment, is it passive or interactive for that viewer? And how are we capturing the data to know how did that viewer experiencing, or who is that viewer? Because for legacy TV providers or even new ones, what are we trying to do? Monetize the audience. We're trying to make sure that we have the right content and, frankly, the right business model, subscription, advertising, sponsorship, for that content at that moment in time that viewer is engaging.
All right, so let me use that as a jumping off point for our last conversational point here, and that is on the advertising and monetization front. How are you monetizing, or maybe not even if directly, indirectly with your partners in terms of helping them think through how to monetize? Because as Sarah's alluding to, right, this isn't necessarily, frankly, it's probably a lot not of selling new spots on a screen or at the same time or in an app per se, right? So I guess the question is, knowing that there are a lot of ad buyer types that are either TV or digital, still frankly not very coordinated and together. How are you then, since you're dancing in the same, across the same fence, how are you helping them at least ideate monetization and or maybe actually doing so? Why don't you start, Deborah?
Yeah, and I think that this is an interesting point that you raise, because they're not working together.
Not at all.
And that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
I've worked across publishing, video ad tech, gaming, home entertainment, and we see the same challenges being replicated across all of these businesses, where predominantly it has to do with whatever group is kind of taking their day job and bringing it onto the shiny new digital platform. Which is not taking advantage of the shiny new digital platform and everything that it can offer. You need to approach this holistically within your ecosystem. So in our world, going direct to consumer, an app is a tool in the toolkit that is great for audience management, knowing your audience, what they're doing, who they are, and building a relationship with them, which is how you bypass Alexa only recommending, Amazon products. So in terms of monetization, we start by asking, what are your objectives with your app? This is a really important question that I think is often overlooked. What are your objectives? Revenue is one of them. But I think that I disagree slightly with one point that was made, which is, I agree, we have to catch everyone where they are and the type of experience that they want, and everyone is an individual, not everyone is the same. But there are loyal users who are going to subscribe and sign up, and this is great, and you can track, monthly revenue and have a very secure business model. But you have to also grow your audience, right? It's not easy anymore. You need to eke every ounce of value and ROI out of what you're doing, your technical investments, and your audience. So in this case, to bring in new users, you probably don't want high barriers to entry. You want it to be easy for them to start interacting with your brand. And this is where advertising, which shifts the revenue off of the user and onto an advertiser, comes into play, or freemium, trial. You need to have something for everyone and realize, who it is you're trying to engage and the best way to reach them.
How are you guys able to help them productize on the ad front?
Yeah, well, in our case, there are basically 2 or 3 different ways in which we help our clients to monetize all this interactivity and the connection with their audiences. The first one, and probably the simplest one, is by adding a layer of interactivity to any TV show or streaming. You are expanding your ad inventory, and you can bring sponsors who will be part of that interactive experience.
So a unique sponsor to the interactive function.
Yeah, we provide them the tools to integrate sponsors. In our case, and this is a decision that we made from our business model, we don't get involved in like bringing sponsors or dealing with agencies or advertisers. That's something that our customers do. We provide them with the tools and with the advice, if you want, to do that in the right way. So sponsorship is, of course, the number one way that, in our case, they can monetize off this type of interactivity by, as I said, expanding that inventory, whether on air or also on their digital properties. The second way is through the experiences that you can build with FlowX on a second screen. Well, these days, second screen, first screen, you don't know which is the second and the first screen. But let's assume for a second that you have a website or an app in which you can embed widgets from FlowX for audience participation. So these widgets, they can connect with your video server, so you can make your users click on any option, play a video, add a pre-roll ad. So in that case, you can plug just your like programmatic ad server and monetize directly without having to deal with the sponsors or anything. So it's the other way that you can do it with FlowX.
Go ahead, Dan. So I have an easy, hard answer to this one. It's easy to say, it's hard to do, but I think we've done a pretty good job of it. So the answer is 360. Everybody says it a lot, but 360 for us is very, very clear. The easy part is to explain it. The hard part is to get it done in the real world. And we have kind of a playbook for this. We call it Megaphone 101. We kind of publish these reports on how to do it. So 360 is very simple. When we go to one of our broadcast partners, we meet with the on-air ad sales team and the on-air production team. We also meet with the digital ad sales team. We put everybody in the room together. We say, look, we're going to sell a 360 campaign. You're going to have a component that's related to on-air. You're going to have a component that's related to digital and social. It's going to be an integrated thing. And we provide them with, like, for lack of a better word, a kind of blueprint that says, this is how you sell to an advertiser. So you're going to be selling normal spots, you're going to be selling megaphone interactivity, you're going to be selling logo and brand attribution, you're going to be selling banner ads on your website, you're going to be selling megaphone interactive ads on your device. So we actually wrap together 10 or 12 different line items, 6 of which we provide. But we provide them a blueprint for a campaign, which is, here is a campaign you can immediately take to market. Any advertiser can understand it. All the ad sales folks inside the broadcaster, whether they're TV or digital people, they can go, oh, that's my piece, that's my piece. But it's maybe the first time they've sat together and said, that's my piece, that's my piece, that's our piece. Right? So we provide them a 360 blueprint. I think that's been very helpful.
So that's my question. The first time that they sat together to talk about that, right? So I can't imagine that your first introduction of this cross 360 idea goes all that smoothly.
You know, not that bad when you say, here's an easy way for everybody to make more money, then they're all smiling. If you say, here's a bunch of extra work you have to do that's unclear whether it's going to function and there's territoriality and you're all going to fight amongst this and who gets commission and blah, 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 it could cause some problems. So we come in with the plan of, here's how everybody's going to work well. And I think, to your point, we walk into our broadcaster, partner's office and we say, hey, this may be the first time that the digital ad sales team and the on-air ad sales teams have ever seen each other face to face. But we explicitly say up front, that's going to happen, everybody get ready for it. And I think when you warm people up to it, when they know it's coming, then it works a lot better.
I've been saying that for 15 years, but go ahead.
I was going to say, so the reality check on that is, first off, the blueprint is a brilliant idea because you're right. We know consumers are cross-screen. We as an industry have not become cross-screen, right? So even if you're enabling the ad sales broadcast team to go sell a 360 campaign, the likelihood of an agency or an advertiser to also have the same people in a room and say, yes, that's great, broadcaster X. I know how to measure that so I can bring this advertiser into a true 360 campaign, I think is still aspirational for the vast majority of agencies. So if we are still a ad-supported industry, which we are primarily, and if most of our new engagement opportunities are still ad-supported, which they are, then I think one of the things that we need to do is not just make sure that we can help our publishers and programmers sell that, but we have got to be able to measure that and make sure that the advertisers and the agencies can connect the dots within their systems as well.
Let me ask you a question then from your perspective.
Gotta be quick.
Okay. What percentage of organizations has a better understanding of 360? Broadcasters or advertisers and agencies?
Neither. It's the advertisers.
Yeah, it's the advertisers.
There you go.
So we
it's
see,
the advertisers.
right, as soon as a broadcaster can get it together to put together a 360 campaign and take it to the market, there's demand. Right? And you would think if they're packaging something that nobody has demand for, obviously it won't sell. So we're seeing the agencies and the brands themselves saying, oh yeah, we get 360, we want to do that, of course. We've just been waiting for the product to exist. So do you find the same thing? Like, do you think that's...
I think we're getting the hook. But I would say in some instances, but to your point, you have to have some either agencies or advertisers willing to jump on the leaf. Everyone wants it, but we do not have systems nor measurement tools that enable advertisers to really ensure that this level of interactivity is something that they can prove out it was a good spend.
It has to be easy.
Right, and that's the magic of ROI, which will be our next half. Oh, we don't have another half hour. I'm sorry, but anyway, just as it was getting good, we now bid you a fond adieu. Thank you very much for sitting through all this, and we'll be here for questions if you want. Thanks very much, guys. Thank you. Thanks.
No, porque me guía yo y es un plan con mi esposa, con Eva, o sea,